Hi, I'm Marcus, 33, and last week I walked out of my own engagement dinner after my future father-in-law called me a starter husband, to my face, in front of my fiancée. We were 2 cocktails in, seated at the long mahogany table in the private room of La Sorella, the kind of Italian place that whispers, "We have a secret wine list." My fiancée, Nicole, looked like a dream in soft lavender, toasting with her parents, her sister, and my confused but smiling mom. Everyone had their practiced polite faces on. Until her dad cleared his throat. He raised his glass, stood, and said, "To Nicole and Marcus. May this be a wonderful first marriage." Everyone laughed politely. Except me. Because I wasn't sure I'd heard him right. Nicole's face froze. Her sister stared at her drink. My mom blinked like she was trying to remember if first marriage was some new Gen Z toast. Then he added, "You're young. Mistakes happen. But it's good to learn early. That's what starter husbands are for, right?" I coughed. "Excuse me?" "Oh, come on," he said, chuckling, gesturing toward me with his scotch. "No offense. You're the trial run. You'll make her stronger for the next one." Nicole mumbled, "Dad, stop." Without looking at me. "Stop? That was it? Is this a joke?" I asked. My voice was too calm. Dangerously calm. Nicole reached for my arm like she was trying to steer a cruise ship away from an iceberg using a spoon. "He's just being honest," her dad finished. "Look, I've worked in finance for 30 years. I've seen the data. First marriages, especially when the woman's successful and the man's aspiring." "Aspiring?" I echoed. He sipped. "No shame in it. You've got a charming personality. You're a phase. A lovely one. The resume builder before she settles down with someone in her league." Silence. And then Nicole whispered, "Please don't make this a scene." "A scene?" I turned to her. "He just called me a placeholder. In front of you. In front of everyone. And you want me not to make a scene?" Her sister dropped her fork. Nicole said nothing. Absolutely nothing. So I stood up. Slowly. Took off my blazer. Laid it neatly over my chair. Picked up my champagne glass. Looked her dad in the eye and said, "To the next husband. May he enjoy the condo I just renovated and the dog I rescued." Then I downed the champagne, set the glass down gently, and walked out the front door while Nicole said my name for the first time all night like she just realized I was real. I didn't go home. Not right away. Instead, I ended up sitting on a bench outside a 24-hour Walgreens, still in dress shoes, eating a pint of Cherry Garcia with a plastic spoon like some jilted rom-com character. Except I wasn't dumped. I'd been forecasted. Like some inevitable failure Nicole's dad had already budgeted for. I called my best friend CJ, who answered on the second ring with his usual, "Who died?" I said. "Apparently I'm the warm-up act for Nicole's real marriage." He replied, "Okay. Either you're drunk, or her dad said something profoundly dumb. Or both." I gave him the full rundown, spooning ice cream between each bullet point. CJ let out a long, dramatic sigh. "I told you he gave stepdad energy." I laughed in spite of myself. "And Nicole didn't say anything?" he asked. I hesitated. "She told me not to make a scene." CJ went quiet for a beat. "You get it now, right?" "Get what?" "She doesn't pick you. Not when it matters." That sat in my chest like a rock. And he wasn't wrong. There were signs. Tiny ones. How she always deferred to her dad on important choices, the mortgage, the financial planner, even our wedding venue. Dad knows best. Dad just wants what's best for us. Except best always meant control. By the time I got home that night, my phone had 14 missed calls. All from Nicole. One voicemail from her mother, who never called me unless it was to request wine for their book club. Her voice was tight and pleasant. "Hi Marcus, I just wanted to say I hope you're not taking Richard's words too personally. He sometimes tests people he thinks will be part of the family. Consider it initiation." Initiation. I laid on the couch staring at the ceiling for hours, still in my slacks and white shirt, the ice cream melting on the coffee table, as my brain replayed every time I'd let something slide for Nicole. Every time I'd chosen to be the bigger person. For peace. For her. And now her entire family thought I was disposable. Like I was just the guy who paid the caterer and held her purse while she upgraded. The door opened at 2:03 a.m. Nicole came in quietly, heels in her hand. She looked at me curled up on the couch and said, "Why didn't you call me back?" I stared at her. "Why didn't you defend me?" She dropped her heels on the floor. "I didn't think you'd take it so seriously." I sat up. "That's the problem. You didn't think. At all." She blinked at me like I was the unpredictable one. "I need to know something," I said. "If I hadn't stood up, if I'd just laughed along, what would you have done?" She shrugged. "We would have moved on." "Exactly." That's what she did. Every time. Moved on. Ignored the insult. Smoothed the wrinkles. Smiled through the disrespect. I stood up and walked to the bedroom. 10 minutes later, I came back with the ring box in my hand. She said, "Don't." I said, "It's already done." The next morning, Nicole was gone. No note. No text. Just the faint scent of her perfume still clinging to the air like a memory trying too hard to linger. I stared at the empty space in our closet where her dresses used to hang and felt this weird mixture of relief and devastation. I wasn't sad she was gone. I was sad I'd waited so long to see the truth. The truth was, she wasn't cruel. She wasn't mean. She was passive. And passivity is just as dangerous when someone hands you over to the wolves and pretends they didn't see the teeth. I spent the morning canceling wedding vendors. The florist was lovely and told me I could repurpose the deposit into a sympathy bouquet. If I wanted to send something to myself. I almost laughed. Then came the part one was dreading, telling my mom. She came over that afternoon with a bag of groceries and a big hopeful smile. "You two work it out." I shook my head. Her smile faltered, then disappeared completely. "Want to tell me what happened?" I told her everything. From the first toast to the ring in the box. She listened in that quiet, still way she does when she's furious but keeping it in the vault because she's a lady. Then she said, "You know what your grandfather used to say?" I braced myself. "What?" "If a man tells you you're a mule, laugh. If a second man tells you, check for hooves. If a third man tells you, buy a saddle." I blinked. "What does that mean?" She set down the eggs. "It means if everyone around her treats you like you're temporary, and she doesn't stop them, maybe you're just a mule. Carrying everything until someone better comes along." And suddenly, I couldn't unsee it. I paid for 70% of our wedding. I remodeled the guest bathroom in her condo. I took her sister's calls at 3 a.m. during her divorce. I spent holidays listening to her father talk about how men like me need to earn their place in upper society. And I smiled through all of it because I loved her. But love, apparently, was not the currency they traded in. They traded in pedigree, wealth, leverage. I was just the charming placeholder. The starter pack. The good enough for now boyfriend they could mold into something passable. Except I finally broke the mold. CJ showed up later that night with whiskey and a new rule: we weren't allowed to say her name. "She who must not be wed," he called her, and that made me laugh hard enough to choke. We toasted to dodging bullets with high heels. And for the first time in months, I slept through the night. Until I got a text at 7:42 a.m. the next morning. It was from Nicole. "My father wants to meet. Just you and him. He says he owes you an apology." I stared at the text for a full 5 minutes, like it might sprout wings and fly away if I blinked. An apology? From Richard, starter husband, Walsh? That was like a Komodo dragon offering a hug. I didn't reply. Instead, I paced my living room muttering to myself like a guy unraveling on one of those true crime podcasts. What did he want? Closure? Redemption? To humiliate me in person instead of at a catered event? Eventually I texted back. "Where and when?" He responded instantly. "My office. Tomorrow. Noon." Then added, "No pressure. Just conversation." No pressure, he says. Like he hadn't poured premium scotch over my dignity and lit it on fire. CJ begged me not to go. "That man has Bond villain energy. You'll show up and suddenly be offered a role in his pyramid scheme." But I went. Of course I went. Because part of me needed to understand why. Why someone would go out of their way to sabotage their daughter's relationship and then decide to chat about it afterward. His office was exactly what I expected. Tall glass. Quiet carpets. A secretary named Ingrid who offered me cucumber water with the tone of a woman who has never sipped anything from a can. Richard met me at the door wearing a Rolex, loafers, and that smug half-smile that made me want to throw a paperweight across the room. "Marcus," he said, like we were golf buddies, not combatants in a social class war. Thank you for coming. We sat in matching leather chairs across from a massive mahogany desk. The kind that could host a small wedding, ironically. He got straight to it. I owe you an apology. I waited. He inhaled slowly. My comments at dinner were callous. Callous? That's the word he picked. That's like saying the Titanic had a mild leak. He continued. I wasn't trying to insult you. I was trying to prepare Nicole. And you, in a way. I blinked. For what? He smiled, slow and deliberate. For the inevitable disappointment. There it was. Again. Just like that. The old him peeking through the apology like a roach in a fancy salad. I've seen marriages like yours, he said. Imbalanced. Idealistic. Built on the fantasy that love conquers economics. I leaned forward. I make more than Nicole. He waved a hand. Today. But long-term stability? Legacy? You don't come from money, Marcus. And it shows. That was it. I stood up. Let me be clear. I said. I didn't leave your daughter because of you. I left because she let you talk to me like this and stayed silent. That silence? That was your approval letter. That was your signature on the disrespect. He opened his mouth, but I kept going. I may not come from money, Richard. But I come from love. And respect. Two things your bank account can't fake. So go ahead. Tell yourself you protected your daughter. But I'm the one who dodged the real disaster, marrying into a family that sees people as investments instead of partners. Then I walked out of his office without looking back. No cucumber water on the way out. No regrets either. Until I got outside and saw Nicole waiting by the curb. Nicole stood there, arms crossed, wearing sunglasses like she was trying to hide from paparazzi, or maybe from herself. I stopped short. You following me now? She pulled off the shades. Her eyes were red. He said he wanted to apologize. I laughed. Loud enough that a pigeon took flight. Nicole, that man wouldn't know an apology if it showed up on a Wells Fargo statement. She flinched. I didn't know he'd say all that, she said, her voice small. I thought, maybe he'd finally see you as someone worth respecting. Right, I said. After he declared me a human training wheel. She looked down at her shoes. They were the nude heels I'd bought her for her promotion dinner. Suddenly I hated those shoes. I should have said something, she whispered. Yeah, I said. You really should have. We stood in silence for a second too long. Then she said, Do you still love me? I wasn't ready for that. Because yeah, I did. Or I had. Or some version of me still did. The version that believed we were going to build a life together. The one that ignored all the little red flags waving in the background like they were just festive decor. I don't know, I said honestly. She nodded. I think I do. Love you. Still. That doesn't fix this. I know. She walked over slowly, hesitant, like I might bolt. He's never approved of anyone I dated. He makes me feel small. Like everything I do is for him to sign off on. That's the part one needed you to fight, I said. And you didn't. Her eyes welled. I froze. I've always frozen around him. I wanted to hold her. I did. But I kept my hands at my sides. I was scared, she said. Scared he'd cut me off. That I'd disappoint him. I shook my head. Then he's already won. She sniffled. Is there a way back from this? I don't know, I said again. And I meant it. She reached into her purse and pulled out something wrapped in tissue paper. Handed it to me. I unwrapped it slowly. It was the ring box. The one I'd given her when I proposed on the pier, 2 weeks after she got her dream job and cried in my arms saying she didn't think she deserved to be this happy. I opened it. Empty. I kept the ring, she said. But I thought you should have this. Just in case, you wanted to give it to someone who could protect you from people like my dad. That one hit me right in the gut. I nodded. Slipped the box into my coat pocket. She stepped back, wiped her face, and said, I'm sorry, Marcus. For all of it. Then she got into a black car and was gone. I stood on the curb with the box in my pocket and the taste of heartbreak in my mouth. And I had no idea what came next. I didn't go home. Instead, I walked. Through the business district, past 3 different Starbucks, a street preacher, and a guy selling knockoff Bluetooth speakers for emotional emergencies only. Eventually I ended up in the park where I'd once told Nicole I loved her for the first time. We were sitting on a blanket eating grocery store sushi and watching a dog in a tutu chase ducks. I remembered how she laughed so hard she snorted wasabi. I sat on the same bench. No ducks. No tutu dog. Just me and the quiet ringing of my own damn decisions. The truth was, I didn't know how to stop loving her. But I also didn't know how to keep loving someone who let their silence speak louder than their defense. That evening, CJ called. You alive, or are you halfway to Argentina with a new identity? Still me, I said. Unfortunately. He said. Good. I don't have the energy to make new friends. I told him what happened with Nicole. The sidewalk goodbye. The empty ring box. He was quiet for a moment, then said, You want to hear something wild? Always. She called me last week. My back straightened. She what? Yeah. Said she wanted to understand why you weren't calling her back. Asked if I thought you still loved her. I felt like my lungs forgot how to function. And what did you say? I told her to stop treating you like an unpaid internship. I blinked. CJ. He shrugged audibly. She needed to hear it. You're not a stepping stone. You're a damn mountain. If she wants to climb it, she needs better shoes and a real plan. I laughed so hard I startled a toddler in a passing stroller. Also, he added, I sent your resume to my buddy Theo. He's looking for someone with your skills. High salary. Remote. 0 in-laws. I sat there stunned. You what? Yeah. I figured you could use a fresh start. I know the job's not the issue, but sometimes the best way to reset your heart is to reset your whole damn life. The idea sat in my brain like a neon exit sign. A new city. A new job. A new chapter. I told him I'd think about it. The next morning, I opened my inbox to find an email from Theo with a subject line that read, Let's talk about your escape plan. That was the day I realized I wasn't stuck. Not in this city. Not in this story. Not even in this heartbreak. I flew out to Portland the following week to meet Theo. It was raining, obviously. Like the city was method acting as a metaphor for emotional rebirth. I landed with one duffel bag, one suit, and a head full of what-ifs. Theo met me at this co-working space that looked like it had been designed by a Scandinavian barista with a Pinterest addiction. Lots of plants. 0 walls. A conference room called the Mind Sauna. The job was real. The salary even realer. More than I'd ever made before, and it came with relocation assistance, a budget for home office setup, and a perk I didn't know jobs still offered, respect. Theo said, I need someone who can be decisive without being a tyrant. Someone who listens without disappearing. And just like that, I remembered what it felt like to be wanted for my actual strengths instead of my resume's zip code. I told him I'd think about it. That night, I stayed in a little Airbnb downtown with exposed brick and a record player that only played 70s soul. I ordered pad thai, poured myself a glass of wine, and stared out the window at a world where no one knew me as the ex-fiancée of a woman who flinched at confrontation. My phone buzzed around 10 p.m. It was a message from Nicole. Just a photo. Of the pier. Where I'd proposed. Under it, one sentence. I miss us. I stared at it longer than I should have. I typed back 4 different responses. Deleted them all. Then I put the phone face down and turned up the record player until El Green drowned out my memories. I was done being haunted. The next morning, I called Theo. I'm in. He sounded relieved. Great. When can you start? I looked around at the cozy, unfamiliar apartment and said, as soon as I pack up my regrets. 2 weeks later, I was officially a Portland resident. CJ helped me load the U-Haul and made exactly 4 jokes about flannel and beard oil. Nicole didn't text again. And I didn't reach out. But one afternoon while unpacking a box labeled kitchen/mistakes, I found the ring box again. Still empty. Still heavy. I stared at it for a long time, then carried it down to the waterfront and dropped it into the river. No ceremony. No speech. Just a quiet goodbye to a version of me who stayed too long hoping silence would turn into defense. Portland didn't fix everything. I didn't walk off that plane and suddenly stop thinking about Nicole. Healing wasn't some airport escalator you just step on and glide away from your past. It was messy. Uneven. Like rebuilding a house after finding out the foundation was made of papier-mâché and red flags. But it was mine. I set up my new apartment slowly. No one to compromise with over furniture choices or which set of wine glasses matched the plates. I bought an ugly yellow armchair that looked like something your weird aunt would own, and I loved it. Every time I sat in it, I reminded myself that comfort doesn't need anyone's approval. Theo's job turned out to be everything I didn't know I needed. The team was collaborative, supportive, and nobody once asked if I had plans to marry up. They valued my input and paid me for my time, two things I hadn't experienced in the same sentence since grad school. I found a little coffee shop around the corner from my apartment where they learned my name by week 2 and gave me extra whipped cream without asking. There was a jazz trio that played on Saturdays and a barista with a mohawk who made unsolicited life suggestions with every cappuccino. "You look like someone who needs to stop checking your ex's socials," she said one morning, handing me my drink. I blinked. "I haven't checked them in 3 weeks." She raised an eyebrow. "Good. Keep going." And I did. Eventually I stopped doing things that reminded me of her. I deleted the wedding playlist. Took down the photo of us at the lake house. Donated the jacket she loved to a thrift store without ceremony. The silence in my apartment became less hollow and more peaceful. One night, I was walking back from the grocery store carrying a bag of things that, for once, were only mine: frozen dumplings, overpriced hand soap, and a plant I'd named Leonard, when it hit me. I wasn't just moving on. I was becoming. Not a new person, but a version of myself who didn't shrink to fit someone else's narrative. A man who could walk away from love if it meant protecting his peace. One Friday after work, I met up with Theo and some of the team at a local bar with string lights and trivia nights. I wasn't planning to stay long, but I got paired on a team with a woman named Camila, marketing director, terrifyingly good at history, and funny in a way that didn't try too hard. She asked what brought me to Portland. I said, "A toast gone wrong." She laughed. "Sounds like a story." It was. But now it's just a prequel. Over the next few weeks, we started grabbing coffee after work. Nothing intense. Just easy conversation and shared complaints about the printer that only jammed during client deadlines. She had this grounded way of existing, like she wasn't trying to be anyone's ideal, just her own person. It was magnetic. Still, I was cautious. Not because of her, but because I knew what it was like to fall for the idea of someone. To mistake silence for support. To confuse compatibility with convenience. One night, we were walking home and passed a street musician playing At Last by Etta James. Camila stopped. Closed her eyes for a second. Then looked at me and said, "Do you believe in signs?" "Only when they come with an exit strategy." She laughed. There. We kept walking, and I realized I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't bracing for some invisible parental approval test. I wasn't performing. I was just with someone. Fully. We're not rushing it. I'm not proposing on a pier or planning elaborate brunches with in-laws I secretly dread. But it feels real. Because she sees me. Not as potential. Not as a stepping stone. Just as me. One day, maybe I'll tell her the whole story. About Nicole. The ring box. The apology that never landed. The man I used to be, trying so hard to be chosen, he forgot he could choose himself. But for now, I'm just enjoying the quiet joy of a life I built, brick by brutal brick, on my own terms. The last text I ever got from Nicole was short. "I'm glad you're okay." I never replied. Because I am. Okay. More than okay. I'm finally free. And freedom, as it turns out, looks a lot like sitting in a yellow chair you chose yourself, sipping a drink you don't have to share, while the person next to you doesn't try to change a thing. The real love story wasn't about who I almost married. It's about who I became when I didn't. I didn't expect the email. Subject line: "Hey." From a very different place. Sender: Nicole Walsh. I almost deleted it. But curiosity is a tenacious little bastard. It was short. No emotional landmines. No regrets dressed up as poetry. Just a few plain sentences that somehow carried the weight of 1,000 rehearsed apologies. I wanted to say thank you. Not for walking away, but for showing me what I was too afraid to see. I'm in therapy now. Actually, finally. I'm working on the parts of me that stayed small for too long. I hope Portland is treating you well. And that was it. No fishing for connection. No what if sprinkled between the lines. Just someone trying to make peace with her part of the story. I sat there staring at my screen, the cursor blinking like it was daring me to respond. I didn't. Not because I was angry. Not because I didn't care. But because that chapter was already written. And closed. Sealed with a sigh and a lesson I'd earned the hard way. Later that evening, Camila and I hosted game night at my place. Just a few people from work, some neighbors, CJ on Zoom being wildly inappropriate per usual. The yellow chair had become his unofficial throne. Camila leaned into my side as we watched two people argue over the rules of Uno like it was the Geneva Convention. She whispered, "You know, this is the most fun I've had with a group in years." I smiled. "Even with CJ screaming about reverse cards?" "Especially with that." After everyone left and we were cleaning up wine glasses and cookie crumbs, she found the old ring box in the junk drawer, empty still, but now buried under rubber bands and IKEA screws. She held it up. "This yours?" "Was," I said. Past tense. She didn't pry. Just nodded and set it back down like it was a spoon or a sock or any other thing that didn't define me. Later, curled up on the couch, she asked what I wanted for the next year. Not in a dreamy, champagne-flavored way. But seriously. I thought about it. About how much had changed. About how much I'd grown simply by refusing to shrink anymore. So I said, "I want peace that doesn't expire. People who choose me loudly. And furniture I never have to compromise on again." She smiled. "That sounds like a life worth building." And right then I knew. This time, I wasn't the placeholder. I was the real thing. And no one had to say a damn toast to prove it.